Dr. Swift, our information item this evening is the 2017 graduation rate annual report, and I understand the news is good.
It is.
Okay. Is that all we need to know?
That's a start,
Okay.
yes. Well, good evening, trustees and members of the community. Graduation is the handshake that delivers on what we think of as 13 years of education. I'm so proud with our Young Fives program. We get 14 years with a good number of our students now, and we know that graduation is the delivery on the promise we make in public education. I don't know about you, but that excites me. It excites me how many students we get across the stage at graduation, and making sure that graduation is meaningful, that it means that they are prepared for a life, for career, for citizenship, and for their next steps into the world. Trustees, we'll go through these numbers. Before we launch into this, I wanted to just point out that we have made several steps this year that you all have been made aware of, and I feel like we're just getting started on our move toward improving graduation rates across our most vulnerable students. One of those is making sure that we have options, credit recovery program in every single high school. And those are delivered by teachers, by highly qualified teachers in our own buildings. And in years past, our students had to go to a central location, make it over to Pathways or make it over to Pioneer. Now they can get that credit recovery, and they are offered at a variety of times. So some will go right after school, some will return in the evenings to do their credit recovery. A second piece, trustees, that you've been working on is we have the 9th grade counselors and the 9th grade deans who are absolutely keeping their eyes focused on every child that becomes close to losing credits, and making sure that they are immediately moving into an options opportunity and getting themselves caught up on the credit, because we all know once a student is on that slippery slope of being deficient in credits, it's like a snowball. It just gets bigger and bigger. So I'm really proud of those two significant steps. And when I recently visited with the high school group, their words were, yes, this is pretty good news, but we can already see that in the years to come, the gains are going to be significant, and they're going to be significant with those students who are the most vulnerable. And I don't know about you, but that gets us all excited. So let's take a look at the numbers, trustees, and we can see this first slide. We just do that because we're supposed to show context. We always expect that we'll be above the national level and above the Michigan level. Trustees, in your packet is another contextual piece. You see there a map of the country and graduation rates. Now, this is not the same year because these get published in arrears, but you can see there the rates as they are across the country. Okay, let's look at where we are in the Ann Arbor Public Schools this year. You can see this is our 4-year on-time rate, and thanks to the good help of the committee, we really sliced 5 years, which is consistent with what we do with all of our annual reports pretty much, is we try to look at 5 years. Trustees that have served on the board for a while, you remember that we were always marking against 2011 when we shifted over to merit curriculum. It was great discussion on the committee that just kind of woke us up to, well, that's been 7 years now. We could probably let go of 2 years and just do the normal 5-year look. So this looks a little very consistent with our reports. 3.2% gain overall. We believe our most important competitions are with ourselves. So this is the most important look, along with the student groups that we'll do in just a moment. The second slide, or second graph you have there, really shows us in comparison to Michigan. Trustees, you know, as we look at this slide, we expect that our performance will be significantly above the state. Those are the expectations that we hold in the Ann Arbor Public Schools. And I will just point out 2 areas where we are laser focused because they emerge here very clearly. One is economically disadvantaged. We're not above the state like we are in the other areas. And then the second one is Latino, Hispanic. So you can kind of see there that 2 of these things don't look like the others. And so we pay attention to that as well. Let's take a look at our student groups. African American students up 2.9% over the 5 years. We're very excited about that 5% gain from 2016 to 2017. The Performance Committee prior to this month has had a lot of discussion around the size of that group. So Ms. Osensky, when she was developing this annual report, dropped your in size down at the bottom of the slide so you can refer there. And you can see how that group has kind of fluctuated over the years in the number of students. Second group, we do this in alphabetical order, are Asian students. They fell off just a little bit this year, and yet they are consistently in the mid-90s over 5 years. Latino Hispanic students. This is a smaller group for us, 74 students, and yet we've got work to do there. There is a disparity, as you can see. We are proud that they've gained 5.6%, and yet we have work to do in this area. A number of this group are also second language students as well, so we pay attention to that also. Our next student group is our students of 2 or more races. You can see there that we gained 2.1% over the 5 years, dropped off just a hair this year with that group. That group is 85 students, so it is also a smaller group. And then white students. A gain of 4.9% over the 5 years. It is our largest group, individual group, and at 93.4%. Then we also, as you know, trustees, always look at economically disadvantaged. This is one of our focus areas in the district. And trustees, I've said it before and I'll say it again, we have work to do in this area. So this is why having an options program in your own high school so that you don't have to get transportation over to another location in order to get your credits caught up is a really important strategy for this group. So trustees, I'll be working with our high school folks, and we will be bringing trustees, as you would like to see or hear about it, a plan focused on this area of our data. And then our last glance at a student group. This one tends to swing, as you can see there, and yet we've gained 4.2% over the 5-year time frame. And these are special education students at 63.6%, so a significant disparity. Now, as we think about disparities, if you'll join me in looking at slide 12, you can see there across our 5 student groups that really there's a disparity between 77% and 94%. So we take that work very seriously. That disparity is our focus. And then Ms. Osinski will show you the next slide, which adds in economically disadvantaged and special ed students. And you can see there about a 30 percentage point disparity range. So we've got work to do. Every single group is up over the 5-year period, except for Asian. But what we must create are greater gains by the groups that are the most vulnerable. So when we bring you more about our strategic plan in this area, you will see that that will be the focus, is on the 5 areas where the disparities exist. You can see them here is special education students, economically disadvantaged, Latino, Hispanic, African American, and 2 or more races. So those are our 5 focused groups on which we will continue our work. Here we are by student group, just another look Ms. Osinski put together for you, and that one kind of reminds us that we do see gains in every group, except for our Asian group, and yet the disparities are still there, notably. On slide 15, what I always like to look at is who's gaining the most. And when we are able to support toward equitable practice and equitable outcomes, we would hope to see the 5 groups who are most vulnerable with the greatest gains. That's what we would hope to see. So you can see we have work to do there, and we're excited about that work. Let's look at some comparisons. As we always say, our most important competitions are with ourselves. So the first half of the presentation was really us looking at how we're doing and comparing that with prior performance. These slides, the trustees always like to see these, and our community expects to see them, is how we're doing in comparison to other folks. Now, this first slide has to do with geography. These are all of the districts who are a part of our county. None of these districts are similar at all to Ann Arbor Public Schools. And yet we do this comparison because we all exist in the same county, and we want to kind of see how we're doing against our neighbors. So on the next slide, you can see there over time how we've done in comparison to our neighbors. It's wonderful to see most districts gaining over the 5 years. And yet, we want to stay in there and be competitive. The next one is one trustees you're used to seeing, you're accustomed to seeing this. These are the highest performing districts in the state. You do have, by the way, trustees, a supporting chart in your packet that gives you the demographics on these districts. This helps you to look at the comparisons and make sense out of them as you compare to other districts. So our highest performing districts in the state, you can see where we are in comparison to those guys. And then if we go to the next slide, here we are in how we've moved over the 5 years compared to how everyone else has moved there. You can tell by looking at the demographics on your blue chart that we don't have a lot in common in terms of poverty and in terms of diversity with those districts. But we do take a look at that because we always want to be in the game with the highest performing in the state. The next slide is our similar district slide comparison. And similar districts means these districts are more similar. As you can see by looking at your blue chart, trustees, these districts still are not mirrors of the Ann Arbor Public Schools. We really don't have a true mirror district in the state, but this does give you some guideline as to how the most similar districts to us are performing. So you can see that range between 90 and 93%. I'm sorry, there was an 89 in there, yes, from our neighbors in Plymouth Canton. You can see here how we've done over the 5 years in comparison with others. So really pretty similar trajectory there. Just a reminder, trustees, we started on this path of Michigan merit back in 2011, and it's old news now, but we always put this in here to remind folks that back in 2011, we added the arts credit and we added 2 credits of math that really changed the game on graduation back in 2011. This is our 7th graduating class since that change happen. Before we do our last set of charts, this part of the presentation has to do with on-time four-year graduation. We've covered that already. It also has to do with our dropout rate and with our cohort performance. So let's look at those real quickly. Slide 24, the left-hand block of data are those students who graduated with their cohort in 4 years. We had a great discussion about this in committee, and just remind ourselves, this means students who begin together at 9th grade and finish in 4 years. The second set of colorful blocks there are those students who took an extra year to finish. So you can see when we go to the 5th year that we're really getting that graduation rate up to 92%. And then the far right-hand set of blocks are those students who finished in 6 years. In 6 years, we're now finishing 93% of our students. We had a great, robust discussion in planning, in performance committee about that 93% is not 93% out of 100%, because of course there is some attrition between 9th grade and 12th grade. There are those students who move away and we don't get the confirmation of where they've landed, and so we do lose a few in that time. Let's look at the four-year cohort all by itself. On the next slide, you can see there we've gained 3.2% in the rate by which we're able to finish students 4 years on time. Next slide is the 5-year cohort, improving that by 1.5%. So we're now at 92% at the 5-year cohort. And then our 6-year, almost 93% with students over a 6-year time frame. You know, it doesn't bother us a bit if students stay with us. We want them to stay with us and get themselves graduated, and that's why we're proud of our programs in working with students to keep them engaged and keep them attending school. So trustees, that is the annual 2017 graduation rate report. Like I said, we had a great conversation in committee. I'll look forward to your questions. I do have Julie, our data person, on the line. She's watching us this evening, and we can just text her any questions if we need to, although the trustees on the committee became very knowledgeable in their time of looking at this. So thank you, and I'll be seated so I can grab notes, and thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Swift, and thank you, trustees. That was great information and good news, so thank you.
Thank you.